I do hope that I'm not the first to wish you Merry Christmas today, but if I am, Merry Christmas to us, from us at the Foundry to you. My name's Scott. If we've never had the chance to meet, I'm so grateful that you're here. And I know that for some of us, when it comes to the phrase Merry Christmas, I think some of us really are in that space where we're excited, life is good, things are coming together for us. And then there's others of us that come into this room and we hear Merry Christmas and it falls on ears or hearts that are in doubt or struggling or frustrated by the circumstances you may find yourselves in. Some of us hear Merry Christmas tonight and you're like, yes, it is a Merry Christmas because I'm here with people that I care about. I'm here with people I love. And then there's others of us who may feel really distant or far. Maybe extended family or a loved one lives far from where you are today. There's some of us that have added to our family in this year, and we're really excited for those new additions. And yet there are those who walk into this room maybe feeling the sting and the grief of having a Christmas without someone that we love. Merry Christmas for some of us falls as our relationships are in order and things are good at work. And then there are some of us tonight that hear Merry Christmas and that phrase lands in a place where our relationships are strained and we're frustrated in those relationships or in our lives. And I don't know where you land or somewhere in between those extremes, but I'm just so grateful that you are here. And I just want to let you know that I don't intend to be able to solve in the next 30 minutes or so before you walk out of these doors that life, I can't promise that life is going to feel perfect and pretty because you came into this room. But what I hope we will do in our few minutes together is be reminded of a hope that we have that's available to us, a light that steps into dark places and into the dark spaces that we may find ourselves in. Jesus says this in John chapter 8, verse 12. He says, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. And of course, what Jesus isn't saying here, what he doesn't mean is not that if you just follow the light of Jesus, you're never going to have a bad day. You're always going to be able to find parking. You're never going to have any troubles in any of your days. No, that's not what he's saying at all. What Jesus is saying here is that when this light is something you are carrying in you and with you, it will shape and frame your perspective as you endure and face a myriad of things, whether they're victories or difficulties in your story. Over the course of these past couple of weeks leading up to tonight, we've looked at different traditions and celebrations, trying to just think strategically about the realities of what those things might point to. So Katie mentioned that earlier. We the Yule log that you may ironically place on a smart TV at some point tomorrow, or the Saturnalia, which you may have never heard of, but is the source material for a great deal of the ways that you celebrate in this season, whether you realize it or not. We talked about the Krampus in week 3 and the difference and the distinction with the naughty list and the nice list and what that says about kind of the human condition. And then last week we looked at the idea of solstice and this longing for light. I mean, just that there are generations of people that have tried to deal with in the physical reality, a more spiritual metaphor for the darkness around us. So what we want to look at tonight is actually December 25th. What will arrive on our calendars in just a few hours from now. And this day that maybe your business isn't going to ask you to come into work and where presumably people will want to gather and we will do a myriad of things in the name of celebration, but why and how and why does it matter? Now, let me just pause for a minute and talk about a time when I was old enough to plan my own birthday. Now, when you were a kid, if you're a kid in this room, you can just take a minute here and just talk to your parent or whoever you're sitting with, and maybe just tell them the best birthday party you can remember or one you've ever had. And as you're telling them that, young people, I'll just kind of point to the adults in this room who are not listening to you right now. A birthday I remember was one that I was like second or third grade, can't remember which, where I had the opportunity to choose my birthday party. Okay, that was kind of a big moment for me, and I chose the Starland skating rink in Hagerstown, Maryland, where dreams come true. And what I remember about the Starland skating rink was that they had a really awesome arcade. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the arcade game, would have been featured there, which is probably the big reason why I wanted to go to begin with. But here was something that I wrestled with. My mom said, okay, yeah, we're going to do that, and it's going to be on the Saturday. But here's the deal, guys. My birthday was on like a Tuesday or a Monday or something like that. And I didn't argue with Mom about this because that was not kind of something you did in my house. But here's what I was thinking. Like, are you allowed to do that? Are you allowed to have a birthday celebration on a day that's not your birthday? Because, I don't know if you know this, but in my second or third grade classroom, like, the teacher will call out that it's my birthday, and people will, in fact, know that the Saturday of that event is not actually my birthday. They're not going to come. They're going to think it's like an imposter kind of deal. And I trusted my mom to, in this case, see this party through to fruition. And I'm happy to report that the Bon Jovi was playing loudly in the speakers and that all of the roller skating happened and we got tons of time to play Ninja Turtles, the arcade game, and people turned up and the pizza's terrible because it's always terrible at the roller skating rink, and we had a really good time. It didn't matter what day it actually fell on, but we found a way, my friends found a way to make that day special. My mom found a way to make that day special for us. Now, December 25th, let's come back to this for a minute. There are some people that say, hey, we're going to celebrate December 25th in just a few hours as the birthday of Jesus because it's the birthday of Jesus. That's what some people will say. And I'm not going to tell you that there's not people that have a case for that. They'll point to Jewish traditions. They'll point to some early church fathers that tried to figure out when Jesus died and backdate it based on other Jewish readings and whatnot. And that's what some people will say tonight. And that's an opinion that people well-standard and scholarly have. Others will say, hey, you know what? The early church at the arrival of Jesus were trying to find some ways to celebrate this, but they were also a persecuted group of people. It was illegal to be a follower of Jesus. And so you had to blend in. And oh, by the way, from December 17th to about the 23rd, and then later till the 25th, there are plentiful amounts of celebrations happening in the Roman Empire where you can just kind of blend in and celebrate. And so that's what they did, right? That's what some people will say, and there's plenty of volumes written on those fronts as well. And there's other people that go, well, hey, have you ever heard of Sol Invictus Day? More specifically, Dies Natalis Solis Invicti. It's been a long time since I took high school Latin, but that is the day, the birthday of the unconquered sun, which is something that the Emperor Aurelian, after traveling to the east and winning a series of battles and coming back to Rome and sort of claiming his stake as like the one who's going to bring Rome together, decides that December 25th is going to be the day that they celebrate the sun god Sol, S-O-L. And he's the invincible God Sol. He is the God of the sun. He's the God who's helped him to win these great battles. He's been in the East. He probably derived and learned a lot of these things from the Persians and the Egyptians, actually. And so December 25th is the day he's decided. Some people say it's because there were already celebrations happening. Other people said because it's the solstice. That doesn't matter for our purposes tonight, but what you need to know is that that was the thing happening around 274 AD. And listen, tonight, whether it's one of those three that landseth or somewhere in between, I'm actually not here to solve that mystery for you. I have opinions. We can banter on the curb. We can share a cup of coffee about it. But what I actually want to point to is why we can embrace that mystery and why I think it actually speaks more so to the idea of what Jesus said he came to do, that to be the light of the world, to be the light of life, helping us walk in and around the darkness in our lives. Okay? But why? How does that make sense? I have two things I want to share. One, I think it makes sense because it speaks to who Jesus came for, who Jesus came to, who Jesus arrived amongst. Right? The whole deal about Aurelian setting up the Sol Invictus Day was to choose a God who had helped him arrive and achieve and stay in his military and political power. Listen to these descriptions of the great soul. The rising sun who dispels the forces of evil, an invincible conqueror of Rome's enemies, and the companion and guardian deity of the emperor, right? Like Aurelian and a soul. We're like this, man, and we're going to hold on to power any way we can. What Aurelian does is he takes anyone who will be kind of a priest of soul and puts them in the Senate, puts them into immediately the elite categories, and begins to tell the people of the Roman Empire, this is a day we worship. I dare you not to. I dare you not to. Now, there's a first century historian named Josephus who speaks to something that you may or may not have ever thought about before. That if you're not rich and powerful in the ancient world, your birthday doesn't matter very much. He says it this way. He says, the law does not permit us to make festivals at the births of our children and thereby afford occasion of drinking to excess, the Romans, right? Like he's saying like, hey, if you have a birthday in the first century world, if people actually acknowledge your birthday, it means that like you are elite, you are powerful, or somebody elite or powerful is trying to make you elite and powerful. So the average person, you and me, like, we didn't really get birthdays. I mean, our moms probably acknowledge that they birthed us on a particular day and probably have some recollection of such things. But the average, actually, birthdays as a celebration are only about 150 years old. Let that blow your mind, right? Like as a thing that like everybody does. Matthew chapter 1. A guy named Joseph receives a vision that his betrothed, the person he's engaged to, is pregnant and is going to bear a child, which is shocking news to him because they've not been together. And he is told in a vision that this child is going to be Emmanuel, meaning God with us. God with us. But I think what matters here is who is the us? Because is the us, rewind 200 or so years, the center of Roman authority and power? Or is it a marginalized man on the outskirts being disrupted by the whims of Augustus Caesar, whose life has been incredibly disrupted by this news, who feels like he's in a place of scandal and is trying to just quietly get through his life? The answer is that Jesus arrives not to the power center of the influence of the first century world, but to the margin, to those who are being oppressed by those very people over there, who are the first ones to hear of this news and pronounce it and behold it. It's shepherds. It's the lowly, it's the discarded, it's the forgotten about, it's the ones who aren't clean enough to go to the temple and celebrate, let alone behold the Messiah. One author said it this way: God didn't come to the world to congratulate the successful and high-five those who have their lives together. He came for those walking in darkness, that they have seen a great light. And this man, this baby who is born on the outskirts, grows as a man. And in his lifetime will experience loss, have no place to lay his head, be rejected by those closest to him, and though innocent, be convicted as a criminal. He fulfills the prophetic word as a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. But by entering the darkness of this world, he can enter the darkness of your world and my world. That's what my friend Tanner says. The good news tonight is not that you have to, in order to achieve some kind of Christmas cheer or arrive at this light that we're talking about, is climb some ladder or figure out some equation about some blend of your good behavior and how much you realize about the Bible or understand or how little questions you may have. It's simply this, that the light has come to your presence, is in your proximity, and is accessible to your story. Yes, even your story. And that's good news for you and for me and for us. Second, Not only does it speak to who Jesus came to and for, it speaks to the idea that he can be trusted with our worship. So when the great emperor sets up this day, this day of honoring the God's soul, the unconquered son, he speaks to the ability to be the conqueror of Rome's enemies, the rising sun who dispels the forces of evil, to be a companion and guardian deity of the emperor. Other phrases would be used like justice and righteousness, the protector or guardian of the harvest and such things. And yet, we know history well enough to know that tonight, I don't know if you were excited to come into this room or not, but this is not a building dedicated to the sun god's soul. This is not, we are not living still under the reign of the Emperor Aurelian. He's dead. And the Roman Empire, while it has a great deal of influence, even still on how we operate and function in the world, is a place that's largely now relegated to museums, or if you go tour the streets of Rome, has been built on a number of times since. But that's what empires do. They pass away. That's what so many of the things we live for do. They fade. Jobs come and go. People come and go. Even the best of people cannot bear the weight of us elevating them to a place of worship in our hearts. And I think what we're dealing with tonight is what we see when we look back over the course of history, is we can see a shift where people were going, wait, this thing that we're looking for here, we're actually finding in this guy Jesus who can bear the weight of this worship. That this young man who that people are beholding on the outskirts becomes a teacher that gathers a crowd, who becomes a disruption to the Jewish elites that say you have to look the part and behave yourself in order to get to God. And he becomes a disruptive force to those in Rome who are saying there's no God but Caesar. And those two put their heads together, conspire, hang him to a cross, and don't have the ability to stamp out his message of light. There's an early church father, a North African church father named Augustine, who makes two observations of this around the 4th century. He says, one, you can't look directly at the sun, like he uses this analogy, but you can pay attention to where the light is falling. And it can tell you something about the character of the sun. And for him, that was an observation to say, when I look at the character of Jesus and I see what that light is doing in and around the world around me, it's compelling to me. It makes me see that Jesus is worthy of my worship, can bear the weight of my worship, the weight of my longings. He also says that hey, all this sun worship in our empire is like all well and good, but I prefer to worship the one that made the sun. And I believe that the scriptures point to, as Paul points to, that this teacher was not just a teacher, but embodied the character of God and was eternal in his own right. And more than I'm trying to solve that for you tonight, I just want to remind us that we have a series of longings. We have a series of things that we're searching for, we're longing for, we're trying to figure out in our story. And I think the question for us is, can the light of Jesus bear the weight of those questions? Can it bear the weight of that confusion? Can it bear the weight of our doubts? Paul in Acts 17 is walking through a part of the ancient Athens where there's all kinds of gods and goddesses and even a tomb made for an unknown God. And what he's telling the people he's walking with and talking with is like, I think in Jesus, he is the embodiment of all of these things you're actually searching for. And I don't know what's going on in your story tonight. Google knows, right? Because you're probably Googling it. And there's the lighthearted things you're Googling, like Betty White, America's Treasure, Queen Elizabeth and the longing for royalty, perhaps what's going on in the world with places like Ukraine. Perhaps you're looking for an escape. You just need someone else to talk about Bruno because you don't want to talk about Bruno. And you needed to look at, let me just find a YouTube video with those songs just so the kids will be quiet for a minute. Or you just really needed to feel smart and get yourself into some Wordle. You needed something mindless, right? But there's other things you're Googling and longing and trying to figure out. And I think the question for us tonight is does this light, does this story, just as in the early empire, right? Like the weight of the worship shifts towards Jesus. What would it look like for the questions and the uncertainties of your story to be brought before the light of God's love and grace and mercy? You can see this relief behind me. It's a mosaic, actually, in St. Peter's Basilica that embodies, it personifies the way the God's soul was once personified, but with Jesus now personified as the one driving those horses. Christmas is not you and I saying, look at what the world is coming to. There's so much darkness, but rather, look at what has come to the world. Look at the light that has arrived in our midst. And tonight is just the reminder to begin to cast our eyes once again on the one who is worthy of our worship, who's worthy and who embodies the love and peace and joy and hope that we're longing for. I'll close with this reading from Henry Nouwen. God came to us because he wanted to join us on the road, to listen to our story and to help us realize that we are not walking in circles, but moving toward the house of peace and joy. This is the great mystery of Christmas that continues to give us comfort and consolation. We are not alone in our journey. The God of love who gave us life sent his only Son to be with us at all times and all places, so that we never have to feel lost in our struggles, but can always trust that he walks with us. The challenge is to let God be who he wants to be. Part of us clings to our aloneness and does not allow God to touch us where we are most in pain. Often we hide from him precisely those places in ourselves where we feel guilty, ashamed, confused, and lost. Thus, we do not give him a chance to be with us where we feel most alone. Closing thought. Christmas is the renewed invitation not to be afraid, and to let him whose love is greater than our own hearts and minds can comprehend be our companion. Let's pray. God, that's a beautiful invitation. It's what we've come to worship. It's what we've come to celebrate. Would you help us to receive it in our hearts, in the difficult places in our story, the places where we experience confusion and longing and uncertainty, the places where we're tempted to disqualify ourselves, or we just look around and we see darkness, God. Would you help us to wrestle with the idea that your light wants to be our companion? In the name of Jesus, our light, we pray. Amen.